My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
You know, I've been talking about earned media value for quite some time on this podcast. My friends at Eisenberg have just raised the bar on earned media benchmarks with their social index. Social Index now gives you globally earned media values across a growing list of 6 geographies for all your KPIs across the top 7 social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can now visualize these values for deeper analysis, and they have a look-back window over 2 years of historical comparisons. Social Index is updated daily. Don't get stuck with old data. Over 1,000 companies have used the Social Index to understand the ROI of their social campaigns. And if you work with a social agency, you should demand they incorporate earned media values into your reports. Get your earned media value for social content. Visit earnedmediavalues.com/Alan. Again, that's earnedmediavalues.com/ALAN.
For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Elyse Winer. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of GenPhoenix, a leading sustainable recycled leather manufacturer, revolutionizing both the mass transportation and fashion industries. GenPhoenix has been expanding its footprint into the fashion and accessories market, forging successful partnerships with brands like Coachtopia and Doc Martens. On the show today, we talk about sustainability of the fashion industry, where it's going, what it needs to do. We talk about GenPhoenix and how it adapts and is moving its business from a traditionally heavy B2B and expanding into the consumer business market. We talk about the partnerships that they're forging with Coachtopia and Doc Martens, among others, and what early stage companies and scale-ups like GenPhoenix should be doing with their marketing budget. That and much more with Elyse Winer. Well, Elyse, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about your business and what the interesting things that you guys are doing. But before we go there, it's not every day I get to chat with somebody that's actually hung out with Snoop Dogg. So I have to know, he is with the Olympics that happened recently. He feels like he's always relevant and always having a moment. But what's he like?
That's a great question. And it's funny that this was the story that popped into my head when you asked me for a fun fact. This goes back to when I was in college. I went to Cornell University, and the last day of classes every year at Cornell is a big event and celebration called Slope Day, where Cornell brings in musical talent, and it's just a big kind of campus-wide concert. And this was my sophomore year in college. Snoop Dogg was the concert guest, which was a big one. And I was in a sorority at the time, and we were actually all wearing Snoopy t-shirts, which is crazy and ridiculous. And a friend of mine befriended somebody who worked on Snoop's crew, who invited us to hang out with Snoop after the show in his trailer. And everyone is acting really cool, calm, collected in this trailer except me. I was losing my mind. I had Snoop call my mom and my best friend, and it was just unbelievable. But I think you make an excellent point is Snoop was as relevant then as he is now. And he's actually, as a marketer, he's a really great example of a brand that has stood the test of time, if you will. He's like a great example of someone who's totally authentically himself. He was authentically himself then, and he was authentically himself in the Olympic coverage that I saw. But he's been able to remain relevant through all of these different kind of trends and decades of change. And one of the stats I heard was that NBC had a 79% higher view than the Tokyo Olympics, and they for the 5-day kind of total audience average. And a lot of people actually credit Snoop for that increase in viewership. So I got to give it to him. But it was definitely a moment I will always remember. And I have a great photograph of me next to Snoop Dogg, and he's wearing this bedazzled gun necklace. And the gun is pointing directly at me, which is funny. But yeah, definitely a moment that is, one of my favorite celebrity encounters.
I love it. I love it. And and the other thing is the guy does not change. He doesn't age.
Oh, yeah. He does not age. It's unbelievable. He looks the same now as he did back then. It's crazy.
I know. I need to know his secret. From Cornell and hanging out with Snoop Dogg to today, you're now the CMO and general manager of consumer at GenPhoenix. Where'd you get your start and how'd you end up at GenPhoenix?
Sure. Yeah, it's been an unusual path to get where I'm at right now. So I started my career on Wall Street at a very interesting time to start a career on Wall Street. I graduated in 2007 and went to work for Merrill Lynch. And not a year later, one of the biggest kind of financial crises of our time since the Great Depression happened. Merrill Lynch would go on to get acquired by Bank of America. And it was really a moment in time where I think going to Merrill Lynch and moving to New York and working in finance almost felt like an extension of college. At the time, my friends and I were either looking at going into finance or consulting. It was like those were the two paths. And I wanted to live in New York City. But I think I had a moment during that time, during the stock market crashing, where I said, what do I really want to do? Do my values and interests really align with what's going on here? And so I made a pivot and actually joined a healthcare management consulting firm called Vynamic that was headquartered in Philadelphia. At the time, I think I was the 16th hire to this very small boutique consulting firm that would go on to grow into multiple locations and eventually get acquired. But what I loved about consulting was I worked on all sorts of different projects across many different sectors within healthcare. And I would eventually come to work on a launch for a pharmaceutical company. So a new product, a new medication that was being brought to market. That would serve as a pretty big tipping point in my career where I got to work on actually building a brand and educating a sales team and telling a story and trying to have impact with consumers and with physicians. And I fell in love with that entire process of bringing a launch to life. But after working in that space and recognizing that big pharma is pretty regulated, and as a marketer and as a creative person, it can feel a little stifling at times. You have a big idea, and then by the time it gets to market, it's such a watered down version of where you started. And I was seeing these digital health startups, a lot of them in the Boston area at the time, having the impact that we within the pharma space were really striving to have with patients and with doctors. Think companies like 23andMe or Fitbit, right, that were contributing to major and positive health outcomes for people, but in a way where they could get things to market quickly. And it was a much more agile model. And I actually made the jump. I had been living in Philadelphia. I moved back to Boston, which is where I'm from. And I joined a startup called MC10 that was commercializing a wearable technology for different kind of sports and digital health applications. And so here I was going from big mega marketing budgets in the pharmaceutical space to running marketing at a startup with virtually no budget to spend on marketing in an area that was really, this was a company commercializing a material science innovation. And how do you take something super techy and make it digestible and interesting to the masses? And I actually think this was another really important moment because I think when you're resource constrained, as I was running this marketing organization, this is where real innovation and creativity can happen. And how do you have impact as a marketer with a drastically smaller toolkit, right? And that's really forever changed my approach to marketing. And I would go on from MC10 after launching a product with them in collaboration with Reebok and really getting to build a brand that was one of the first wearable technologies in the marketplace. I would go on to actually then run marketing for other startups within the Boston area. But it was at MC10 where I would meet Carmichael Roberts, who had founded MC10. He was the lead investor into MC10. And years later, after keeping in touch with him, Carmichael, along with a friend and colleague, Adam Sharkawi, would go on to start their own venture capital fund called Material Impact. Material Impact is really the thesis around Material Impact is investing at the intersection of material science, innovation, and impact and sustainability. And Carmichael had followed my career, saw that I would love to join a startup, build a brand, launch a product, and then I would get bored and want to go on to the next startup. And he said, hey, we're starting this fund. We're investing in really early stage companies that really need hands-on help as it relates to marketing and commercial expertise. Why don't you come on board and work across a portfolio of companies that are all getting their technologies and their products and their brands off the ground for the first time? And so I would join Material Impact first as a marketing partner and later as a partner. And it was through my journey at Material Impact where I would actually become introduced to GenPhoenix. At the time, it was called eLeather. And that was where I fell in love with the company and the mission and the brand. And after serving as interim CMO for GenPhoenix, which is not atypical at Material Impact, we were very hands-on with our investments. But I was 50% of my time was served helping GenPhoenix expand into a new market and rebrand and rename the company. And as I said, I just fell in love and decided to make the leap and join full time.
I love it. I love that. Tell us a little bit about the GenPhoenix business. What do they do, scope of it, et cetera?
Sure. So GenPhoenix is really a material has commercialized a material science technology that breaks waste leather down to the fiber level and then leverages the power of recycled water to build those fibers back up together stronger than before, resulting in a recycled leather product that has an 86% lowered carbon footprint than traditional leather. And so the company has actually been around since 2007. They started their entry point into the marketplace was with the aviation industry. So think aviation seating application. But more recently, we have expanded into the leather goods and footwear industries. But the impact has been pretty profound. Over 250 airlines have adopted the materials. GenPhoenix is the market leader within the mass transportation seating category. And more recently, we've added collaborations with brands like Coach and Doc Martens. And in doing so, we've diverted more than 10,000 tons of waste from landfill. So when I got introduced to GenPhoenix at Material Impact, we had been looking at the sustainable materials category, alternative to leather category for quite some time. And there's a lot of very exciting innovations that are on the marketplace, attempts at mimicking the qualities and the quality of leather. But what we really looked for at Material Impact was a company that could really scale something and meet the demands of brands that are increasingly looking for more sustainable alternatives to meet their decarbonization objectives. And the fact that GenPhoenix had been quietly at this for 15 years in a company based in Peterborough, England, outside of London, I flew there while I was at Material Impact to go visit the factory, and I was blown away. They have a massive state-of-the-art, like football field-sized factory, and they are just cranking out this sustainable material. And just the sheer scale of the operation, the quality of the product, this was a brand that I knew could have massive potential for disrupting the sustainable material space. And the fact they started in a very rigorous space as mass transportation seating, as I'm sure you can imagine, creating a recycled leather that could meet the wear and tear of 24/7 use in aviation. And I knew that this was an incredible foundation to expand into new markets like fashion and footwear. So Material Impact led an investment into GenPhoenix, an $18 million round in March of 2023, alongside actually Tapestry, the parent company of Coach, Stuart Weitzman, and Kate Spade, Doc Martens, as well as Jaguar Land Rover. So seeing kind of these strategic investors who are also customers of the brand also invest in the future of GenPhoenix was just an incredible signal about the potential of this company.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you've got this dual role of both Chief Marketing Officer and GM for consumer. What does that look like in practice? You've described the history of the company, and most of the listeners listening to this have probably sat on your product.
Oh, yes. Yes. You have definitely flown on a GenPhoenix seat without realizing it. And it's funny, I've been on planes now where I've lifted up the seat cushion. It's ridiculous. People are looking at me like, what are you doing? And I think in any sort of startup or scale up environment, you end up wearing a lot of hats. and GenPhoenix is no exception. So starting with the CMO position, the company, as I'm sure you can imagine, given the early markets that it was in, traditionally a very engineering driven organization, right? And that's for good reason. Performance is the hallmark of the brand. Durability is the hallmark of the brand. That was what was most important to aviation, rail, and bus customers who scrutinize materials for their ability to stand up to that 24/7 wear and tear I spoke about. But then you think about expanding and navigating the consumer markets of luxury leather goods and footwear. Performance matters, but brand and storytelling and connection are just as critical. Think about it. The material is the star of the product, right? You're holding this handbag or this boot, and there's this emotional connection between the product and the consumer that purchases it. And I think there was recognition across the board at GenPhoenix that investing more in brand was really critical. I think particularly just given the times, we see so many new sustainable materials coming on the marketplace. So how do we gain visibility for GenPhoenix and raise the profile of the company when there's so many different contenders and competitors in the marketplace? And also, and this is a challenge for any B2B marketer, in investing in brand, we really thought about how do we establish GenPhoenix as an ingredient brand with a strong sustainability story to tell, an ingredient that brands are going to be proud to talk about because it lends credibility to their sustainability story. As CMO, I support marketing across all the verticals we serve. But given my experience in consumer markets from earlier days and my knowledge of the consumer kind of sustainable material space from my time at Material Impact, GenPhoenix thought I was positioned to add some value to the GM consumer role as well. Until now, consumer was a smaller market segment for the brand. But if you just look at the signal of the strategic investors like Doc Martens and Tapestry, who came along board, right, for the investment, we felt it was important to place more investment into this side of the business as well. The great part about it is there's so much cross-pollination between the different verticals because of the fact I serve across the business, right? So there are things that I'm learning about and seeing in aviation that have tremendous value in consumer and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, it's still a consumer sitting on that seat and purchasing that handbag. And I think it's always great when you serve multiple industries. It's a great way for you to amass best practices and share them across the board. So
that's awesome. No, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I know we'll get a little bit more into kind of some partnerships that you're working on and things like that. But before we do that, you've highlighted some of the stats that you guys have already achieved, but I'm curious about sustainability in the fashion industry and what's the current state of it and how do you see it going forward?
Sure. Yeah. It's no secret to us. The fashion industry is a major contributor to waste. There are statistics that up to 92 million tons of textiles end up in landfill every year. You can see there's a landfill in the Chilean desert. You can actually see from space at this point. It's outrageous. And it's funny. There's just an article that came out this week that states like California actually want fashion brands to start paying for waste so that they don't end up in landfill. And then we've also seen the EU really leading the way as it relates to waste mitigation strategies and tactics. And this waste contributes a lot to carbon. Waste is not the only issue here, right? The leather industry has come under a lot of scrutiny as being a highly resource consuming sector. Leather obviously has a carbon footprint associated with it, but it's also estimated that leather processing produces 200 times more waste than total product output. 60% of a leather hide can go to waste. And we see that waste as actually having tremendous value at GenPhoenix, right? We see it as a raw material that can be reprocessed and rebirthed rather than ending up in landfill where it can have no value. We don't see ourselves as competitors or at odds with the leather industry. We see ourselves as working with the leather industry to actually just translate the stuff that they don't need into something valuable for brands. So at GenPhoenix, we make a material that's based on a waste stream of a byproduct of the beef industry. And our belief is its circular production is key to reducing the carbon footprint of traditional and synthetic leather alternatives. So we take stuff no one wants and we build it back up so it can be used again and again. And this is really important in fashion because not only are we seeing some of kind of these regulatory shifts as I described, but we're also seeing brands set extremely ambitious decarbonization objectives, right? And for legacy leather brands, they're looking at ways that with leather being a component of that carbon story, how can they move towards integrating new materials that help them reach their carbon goals, but don't force a consumer to compromise on the luxury and the quality or the price that they've come to expect from these brands. That's a real challenge, right? When you introduce new innovation, a lot of times it might be more expensive and it may not perform as well. And we know just based on data and based on our own experience selling our product, people don't want to pay a premium for sustainability. They care about it, but they won't pay more for it. They care about it, but they're not willing for their shoe or their bag to fall apart in a shorter period of time than a traditional leather bag would. Our goal and what we really focus on at GenPhoenix is what we call price, performance, and planet, right? We create materials that meet the price and performance specifications of leather brands while also enabling them to achieve their decarbonization and waste objectives. And it's because of our ability to hit all three that we've had success actually scaling up and actually creating meaningful volume of product within the brand collaborations we have, right? So not a capsule collection or a pilot product or a single tote bag, but actually we're working on lines of product that are now integrated into the lines of the brands that we work with. And that's pretty big. And I would say the last thing as it relates to fashion is just the consumer at the end of the day. There's just younger consumers, Gen Z in particular, are demanding higher levels of transparency from brands. It's no longer enough to say you are sustainable, right? Or you are recycled. You got to prove it. And so that's something we're really focused on at GenPhoenix. We have a life cycle analysis that we share with our brand partners. As I mentioned, our material has an 86% lowered carbon footprint than traditional leather. And our process and our manufacturing is something that where we prioritize sustainability as well. So we've had zero waste to landfill since 2016. We recycle the water that we use in our production. We use 100% renewable electricity. We have independent third-party certifications from such as the Global Recycled Standard or the Recycled Content Standard. We're ISO compliant. All of our suppliers are Leather Working Group audited or approved traders. We are really focused on being that transparent, trusted partner to brands so that they can combat greenwashing that's happening in this category, right? And yeah, I would say it's just a convergence of a lot of things going on right now where brands are super focused on seeking out and adopting new materials and innovations that can help them reach their sustainability goals.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Awesome. As you add consumer, because I was going to say it was a pivot, but it's not a pivot. You're adding an entire new market. You've done a bunch of things, right? You've rebranded right before you joined full time, and then you've started to develop relationships. Obviously, you had some strategic investors too in the mix. What else did you guys? Are you having to change, adjust, modify to go after this consumer market?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right. It's an expansion versus a pivot. I think mass transport seating is still this core foundation of the business. And to be honest, as I mentioned earlier, there's so much overlap between the spaces, right? Both markets have decarbonization commitments. Both markets are thinking about how to appeal to Gen Z, right? Which is when we think about their anticipated spending power and the fact they're a very eco-conscious customer base. But I think one of the things that's really cool about the GenPhoenix story is we started with a market that was not really prioritizing sustainability at the time, right? So from an aviation perspective, we weren't competing on sustainability. Of course, it's always been the core of the business. Circularity is where this innovation was born from. But we had to compete and enter the marketplace with a product that could compete on performance and price and scale, right? So the reason why GenPhoenix's material, e-leather, was so successful in the aviation category is because it actually was it's extremely durable. It can help extend replacement cycles, which is, as you can imagine, can lead to significant savings for a brand, right? So typically, if you have to replace the material every 4 or 5 years, but GenPhoenix's material can actually extend replacement cycles up to 10 years, it lowers your total cost of ownership significantly, right? And it was lighter weight than leather. So you think about the fuel savings and the reduced payload as a result of switching to e-leather. And we could scale to be able to meet the price that is required to adopt our material in a meaningful way by these airlines. So we were competing on a good product that just so happens to be sustainable. And I think that has enabled us to enter and succeed in the consumer category, right? wasn't starting with the sustainability story being the only thing and then trying to race to get a product that could perform and also enable brands to be margin neutral by adopting the product. All of that was already embedded into the product itself. And so these past couple of years working with consumer brands, it's about how do we elevate our material to be able to meet the luxury and the hand feel and the body characteristics of leather. And it's been through those collaborations with these brands where we've really been able to raise the bar even more for just the quality of the product. And guess what? That matters to aviation brands as well, right? Who want to provide a better passenger experience and a more comfortable product. One of the things we say is sustainability only matters at scale, right? You can't really make a dent on the climate crisis unless you can convince a brand to meaningfully adopt your material at a significant volume. And the fact that GenPhoenix has crossed that chasm from innovation to real product, right, has enabled it to have the kind of impact that it's already had in transportation and is having now in the consumer space.
Love it. Love it. You've got some really cool partnerships, places like Doc Martens, Coach. I'd love for you to share a little bit about how does that take place? And then as you're also trying to get some brand credit, whether it's ingredient brand or otherwise, how does that work?
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll start with Coach and Coachtopia because that was the first product launch that we had with one of our partners. Coachtopia is a sub-brand within the Coach universe, really focused on pioneering a circular economy. So every element of Coachtopia's products are scrutinized for sustainability and circularity. So these are bags and accessories that are actually created with the end of their life in mind. These are products that actually can be broken down at their end of their life to be reprocessed and rebirthed into new products. And what's also really cool about Coachtopia was that Coach recognized it takes a long time for us to bring new innovations to market, right? We're a big organization. There's an element of bureaucracy. How can we incubate and get new innovations into the marketplace quickly and funnel those learnings into the kind of larger Coach brand? And so Coachtopia was born. June Silverstein was really at the helm of this. And it's almost like a startup within a large company. It was almost like Coach getting out of their own way, right? How can we strive for what Coach coins progress over perfection, right? Let's get something out there. It might not be perfect, but let's release it. Let's learn from it and let's continue to evolve it. And so the Coachtopia collaboration where we worked on a recycled leather material that has been integrated into the entire Coachtopia line. It actually, when we think about the development of that product and its release, all happened in under a year, which in fashion is almost unprecedented. And the response to Coachtopia has been phenomenal. The line has sold out multiple times, and it's definitely appealing to a younger Gen Z audience. And as far as having GenPhoenix be a part of that story, I think a few things helped in that regard. One is Tapestry is an investor in GenPhoenix, right? So they have skin in the game, and also they really believe in the future of GenPhoenix and our ability not only to develop products that meet their needs today, but to collaborate on future innovations together. Also, a lot of the marketing claims that Coach and sustainability claims that Coachtopia makes come from our story. And the other element I should comment on, and which is a kind of a cool thing to look up, is Coachtopia consumers want to understand where the materials that are going into their handbags are coming from. And so we actually did a video, like a TikTok video, that's found across Coachtopia's social media platforms where Coach actually came to our factory in Peterborough and walked through the entire process of how we rescue waste, break it down to the fiber level, and build up a new product. And it's like an educational and informative video where you literally are peeling back the layers of an element of a product that you may never know about. We never really look under the hood as it relates to the materials that we purchase in products. And this was the first time doing that. And so I think there's just been a really exciting collaboration there. And now as we work on integrating some of those learnings into the larger Coach brand, we see so much opportunity moving forward. But it just so happens that consumers of Coach, they care about this stuff. They want to know about this stuff. And part of that storytelling has to be about GenPhoenix. And that's how we've been able to maintain our brand equity within the conversation around that product. And Doc Martens has also been an awesome journey. Doc Martens launched a line that they call Gen X Napa. There's now been 2 launches over the past year, but the collaboration there, as I'm sure you can imagine, a hallmark of Doc Martens is durability. This is what they are known for. And we went through extensive lab and wear testing to ensure that our product stood up to the durability claims and promise that Doc Martens provides its consumer base. And we hit those specifications and gave Doc Martens the confidence that this could be a material that they could release that would provide no compromise to their consumer. And we did some really exciting storytelling with Doc Martens in store. You can actually see our material, the different stages of our material development, actually like within the shelves of the store. You can actually interact with that story. But I think one of the unforeseen features of the product that we didn't necessarily originally anticipate, but that has been really exciting to get feedback on, is the fact that because our product is lighter, it's also more comfortable and softer and reduces the break-in period for a Doc Martens boot. And that has actually been one of the biggest selling factors for the Gen X Napa line. If you go and read about Gen X Napa, the sustainability story is front and center, but what's at the top is a story around comfort and wearability. And I think that was a really important learning in working with the brand, is that sometimes sustainability in and of itself is not enough. You need to be offering something of value to the customer above and beyond that. And so this is something now that a lot of customers who maybe were hesitant to purchase the DM's boot because of its reputation for having a break-in period, this might open DMs up to new customer segments. And oh, guess what? This is a product with a lowered carbon footprint, and that's making use of waste. And so as we think about how we market in the sustainability category, just leaning on sustainability is not always going to be enough, right? It's almost like brass tacks at this point. Every brand should be looking at sustainability, and consumers expect that. But what can we offer that's more of a product innovation above and beyond what exists today? And so that's something we're really focused on unlocking with the partners we work with.
Yeah. I didn't expect this, but as we were talking, there's been so much constraints / parameters of how GenPhoenix and the material itself was born that has created so much innovation and goodness coming out of it, whether it's just a better material. Oh, and by the way, the better material reduces carbon footprint. It's helping drive a sustainability story, not only for you, but for your partners, et cetera. As we talk about marketing, and you alluded to this earlier in the conversation with the other places that you've worked, organizations that are in this like growth mode, you're always resource constrained as well. And so I'm curious how that same type of constraint environment drives creativity and how you think about marketing in that type of pressure, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I think one of the things that we've really been focused on at GenPhoenix is how can we elevate our story and ensure that we are considered not a material supplier, right, but a technology partner, right? This is a technology innovation that so happens to result in a sustainable material at the end of the day. But when you are viewed as a supplier, it's a very different dynamic between you and the brand than when you're viewed as a technology partner, right, or a strategic partner that's helping us accomplish really meaningful business objectives and goals. And what we've really been focused on is how do we establish that level of credibility and really be seen as someone who can help a brand, not just by supplying a material, right? But help a brand as they think about, okay, this is the material today. What material can we introduce together next that can help us raise the bar even more? Or how do we think about integrating new innovations and new materials into our business? And now that we've been able to do that successfully with so many brands, how do we take those learnings and be seen as more than just, like I said, that vendor or supplier-like relationship? And so from a marketing perspective, I work hand in hand with our sustainability group within GenPhoenix, because storytelling is part of it, but having like sustainability claims that we can really stand up to, right? Meaningful data that's certified and verified and reviewed by third parties. This is where we're going to gain a lot of credibility. So how do we go and get those verifications? How do we produce meaningful data for our customers so we're seen as that trusted partners, right? And not just chasing a marketing claim. So that's been really important for us from an investment perspective. Also within my world, we have been fortunate enough we've won a number of awards in the sustainable innovation category. So we won Fast Company's Most Innovative Company Award. We were recognized by Billboard magazine as one of the best sustainability innovations at CES. We won an Edison Award around sustainability and circularity. And every time where someone in the world says GenPhoenix is innovative, not GenPhoenix saying that we're innovative ourselves, it just helps provide an additional layer of credibility that's really meaningful to the brands we work with. So here's Coach, for instance. Coach is largely seen as a fashion brand. But guess what? They're a technology brand now too. Same with Doc Martens. So we actually, through our own relationship with the Consumer Technology Association and CES, we hosted a panel at last year's CES, a main stage panel that I sat on with the CMO of Doc Martens and the CMO of Coach. And we talked about how do you scale sustainable innovation, right? How do big brands adopt new technologies? And now all of a sudden, Doc Martens is being recognized, Coach is being recognized as more than just a fashion brand, but a real and meaningful player in technology and sustainability. And that creates a lot of brand equity for them, but it's through the collaboration and the partnership with us. So we look for ways where we can provide value to the brands we work with. At the end of the day, of course, we care about elevating our profile, but we care the most about serving the brands we work with and helping them sell product, right? And meet their goals. And so marketing has been about carving out, okay, you know what? We're not going to beat Coach at their own game of trying to reach customers, right? Like we are not a B2C brand. They do that well. But where we do have a point of view and where we do have connections is in technology and in the venture community, right? And in the sustainability ecosystem. And how can we lend that credibility and also those opportunities, like speaking at CES, for instance, how do we provide that to the brands we work with? And brands are much more open to including you in their storytelling, including you as an ingredient brand when they see value creation like that.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. You guys are hitting on all cylinders, I guess, is the metaphor to use. But it's pretty impressive. So kudos to the business and to what you guys are driving. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
One of the things, there's a series of questions I'd love to ask you. We ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, favorite question: what experience of your past defines or makes up who you are today?
There's so many experiences, but one that we touched on earlier, I talked about that first time that I got to launch a product as a consultant in the pharma space. Within that launch, there was actually like one defining moment, I would say, where I got to work on, was an offsite with members of the commercial organization within this company, sales and marketing team members, where a firm was hired to help think through the brand positioning for this particular medication. And the firm that was hired was actually one that had a relationship with a book called Eating the Big Fish by Adam Morgan, which is really all about challenger brands, right? So this medication was number 2 in the marketplace, and they were trying to displace the market leader. And the methodology around how a challenger brand can go up against a giant, an incumbent, David versus Goliath, was something that was a completely transformative experience for me. Every brand I have worked on since that moment has been a challenger brand, right? The very definition of working in the startup deep tech space, the very companies that we invested in at Material Impact, the idea is around disruption, right? Not incremental innovation, but introducing something completely new to the marketplace that sets a new standard. But how do you do that when someone can outspend you, out-resource you, outwork you, right? And that has really been at the core of every marketing challenge that I've had, right? This idea of you can't follow in the steps of who's come before you. You have to create your own steps. You have to create your own rules. You have to shake up the game to get noticed. And I have so many examples throughout my career at this point of doing just that. And I try to take that approach every day in my role at GenPhoenix. Is I don't want to look at what the leather industry does or what competitors in our space do. This is new territory. Let's come up with our own ideas and innovation.
I love that. Yeah. No, that's awesome. It's funny. I haven't heard Eat Big Fish in a while, but like many years ago, I had Mark Barden on so I think he's partners with Adam, the person who wrote the book. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's a small world.
It is a small world.
That's funny. What advice would you give your younger self if you're starting this all over again?
I think my advice is your first job is definitely not your last job. It is in some people's case. But at the time when I remember sitting at Merrill thinking, this is it. This is going to be my path. I looked around me at the people who are more senior than me, and I couldn't see outside that. And I felt like my world was crashing when the stock market was crashing. And here I was like 22, 23 years old. And it felt, my life is over. I had a plan. And what if my job gets eliminated? What if things look differently for me next week now that we have a new parent company? And it felt like the end of the world. And then I just think about how it organically led me to all these steps down a path that have, when I look at my role now and I think about the job I had then, the two have very little in common, other than the fact that first job just taught me how to be in a job and how to learn and how to navigate a political environment and how to be a writer in business, right? Or make a PowerPoint slide, which honestly is probably one of the most important skills that I have along the way, for better or for worse. And so you feel like when you're in it, you can't see the forest through the trees. But what I tell everyone that I'm a mentor for is, don't worry about the first job. Get the experience, get the exposure, but there's multiple jobs you have in front of you. And this isn't the end game.
Got it. Is there a topic either you're trying to learn more about, or you think marketers need to learn more about today?
Yeah, I think one, and I mentioned it, that's particularly important for this new area of sustainability is just this idea of greenwashing, right? Not taking things at face value, that increasingly as marketers, you have to also have an element of being a data scientist right now. And you also, this idea of not having to spin things, but actually honesty is the best policy in some cases. And I think about, it actually goes back to that pharma launch that I worked on. One of the insights we had was like, we should share the good and the bad, right? There's having any relationship with a product, particularly with a medication, it's like a real relationship, right? There's highs and lows, and so let's acknowledge the fact that there's still work to be done, right? In sustainability, there's no silver bullet. but we have the best intentions. And I talked about progress over perfection. Be open about the fact it's not perfect. Be open about the fact that it's a step in the right direction, but not a total solution. And so I think marketers are sometimes in a position of wanting to put a bow on everything. And in the case of sustainability, no, it should be balanced. It should be open and honest. And brands that we work with find that really refreshing, that we provide all of the information, all of the data, and allow them to tell the stories they need to tell based on that information. And I would say the other flip side of the coin is saying something is better than saying nothing at all. Some brands are scared to say the wrong thing. So we hear now the other term, which is green hushing, right? Which is brands that are just like, I'm staying out of this because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Right. No, it makes sense. Yeah, it's a tricky balance to get right. But I love your honesty is probably the best policy. I think you're dead on. So, well, I've got two remaining questions for you. Hopefully we can tackle these. Are there any trends or subcultures that you're following you think others should take notice of?
Yeah, I think one that I find pretty interesting, particularly in the sustainability space, is this idea of like minimalism. You think about like tiny houses on HGTV,
I love
right?
tiny houses.
I love it, right? I'm like, I want to get rid of everything. And I just want to just have the bare minimum and live that way. And so we've seen minimalism in architecture, right? Actually, I studied abroad in Copenhagen in Denmark. And if you think about the Scandinavian aesthetic, like the apartment I lived in was just so minimal. And it was like so refreshing, just having less stuff. Even just like at the moment in my life when I was living out of a backpack, like I was fine. I didn't need all the stuff. And now we're seeing that trend really make its way into the world of fashion, right? So there's the antithesis of it is fast fashion, right? And there's been a lot of negative reaction to brands like Shein, right? Where it's just like this idea of it's quantity over quality. And this is how we have this challenge from a waste perspective that I mentioned earlier in the conversation. But the flip side of that, and one where we really play into at GenPhoenix, is this idea of like quality over quantity, things that stand the test of time. That's an important pillar of sustainability, not just a product's ability to be recycled or rebirthed at the end of its life, but let's keep it in life for as long as possible. So we hear about things like your capsule wardrobe, which is this idea of investing in really high quality pieces, but few of them that can be used in multiple different ways rather than chasing trends or fast fashion. So I think minimalism, particularly in this younger generation, is a trend that's definitely here to stay. And and you see it pop up in all of these different places. I don't know if I'm ready for a tiny house yet, but I sure love a good spring cleaning. Yeah. I'll tell you that.
No, I agree. With kids, I think tiny house would be really hard. But
oh my God, yeah.
my wife and I are a couple of years from empty nest, and we are already thinking about how small can we go?
Yes, I love that. It's freeing.
Yes, yeah, it definitely is. Last question. What do you feel like is the largest opportunity or threat facing marketers today?
I'm sure this is one you've heard a lot, but I think AI is so fascinating. And I think it's just, I see new things every day as a marketer. I think there's incredible opportunity with AI, right? I was vice president of marketing for Lose It, which is a leading weight loss, nutrition, fitness app in the App Store. And one of the features we introduced at the time was pretty groundbreaking, because when I think about it, it was probably like almost 10 years ago, where we could actually, from a photograph of a food, we could capture the nutritional information of that food by using AI and image recognition. And that was just like so huge at the time. It was around the time where everyone was taking food photos. Do you remember like how popular that was? Like people like leaning over their meals. And so this idea of how do we make tracking your food and nutrition as frictionless as possible? And we've launched a feature called Snap It, which literally you snap a photo and it documents the nutritional information and calories in that particular food because it recognizes what it is. And that was just as a marketer, that was so huge. It allowed us to engage with people who might have found food tracking really arduous before, right? But I think the threat, I think about myself as a marketer, how much writing I do all the time. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be writing forever, or is AI going to completely replace that? And one of the things that I remember, one of our investments at Material Impact is in a robotics company that has AI as a big element to it to automate specific tasks. But one of the core things that we introduced through that technology is this idea of a human in the loop, right? That AI is more powerful with a human in the loop, right? And it almost could extend our powers as humans, give us superpowers, right? Where we can do more versus taking us out completely. And so my hope and belief is that there will always be a human in the loop, and that the way to harness AI's power is to make us a part of it, not at odds with it.
I love that sentiment. And I think of it, when you described it that way, I think of those exoskeletons that people can get into, and you can like jump 3 times higher than you normally can. Maybe that's how we need to be thinking about AI.
Yeah, that it'll make us superhuman.
Exactly.
Not less of a human.
Elyse, it's been fascinating and so many nuggets to take away from the conversation. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me with post-production support from Sam Robertson. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com. Tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love hearing from listeners. You can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes and links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.